So this video topic has been on my mind for a couple days now, and I really feel called to talk about this. I'm sure that pretty much all of you who are listening to this have had an experience where you are communicating with someone who comes from a very materialist mindset, and they judge you for your spiritual beliefs, or they mock you, or they say, this isn't scientifically accurate, and how could you possibly believe something that's not backed by material science? And they get very, very triggered. And I think that these situations can be very difficult for us because, in a way, they can almost challenge us to see if we are going to kind of sink into that same level. And what I mean by that is that when someone is criticizing you or criticizing your beliefs, it can be very easy to kind of match that energy and move into a sort of condescending tone as well, or a sort of know-it-all attitude where we're like, well, I have information that you don't. And, we kind of aren't really getting anywhere with that. It's kind of just like talking to a wall. Both people are coming from completely different perspectives, and when they're coming at it from this judgmental perspective, from this condescending perspective, no alchemy occurs. There's no sort of transference. There's no sort of shift that happens there. And so I think that when we are put in these situations, it's often an opportunity for us to really see if we can be rooted in our spiritual beliefs, to see if we can truly embody them in these moments when we are being challenged. Because to truly embody these beliefs is really to be a living vessel of love and compassion. And even if you are not able to agree with someone or convince them of your beliefs, which is not really our job. It's not our job to try to convince other people. But even if you're not able to come to an agreement, your very energy can be so potent and can plant a seed for these people. And it might not grow right away. You might plant a seed now, and then something in 3 years from now will cause that seed to be watered and grow a little bit more. And then something else will happen and a little bit more. And eventually we see years down the line that this has blossomed into the most beautiful flower. And so I really feel like we can't really look at someone always from where they are coming from in the present moment, because we don't know where their journey is leading them. For a lot of us, our spiritual path is like a spiral. So we tend to return to the same things with a deeper wisdom, with a deeper knowledge. And this is true for us even within the spiritual community, where we'll often have certain beliefs at first and we'll be really entrenched in these illusions or false light, or whatever it may be, dogmatic beliefs. And then something will happen where we will kind of be initiated outside of that illusion. But we look back on it with gratitude, because it is only in intimately knowing these illusions that we've come to recognize genuine truth so distinctly. And so when we are speaking with someone, we are never really sure where they are at in that spiral journey. We can't judge them for where they're at. I mean, period. We can't judge them, period. But, you can't really judge someone from where they're at in the present when you are not privy to the entire spiral that is their life, that is their lifetimes to come. So all we can really do is create this magnetism, create this beauty within our energy body that transmits these feelings of love, that transmits these feelings of peace and compassion, and hope that that becomes an alchemizing force for that person. And I think it's really hard, especially when you are speaking with someone who's a materialist, because you feel a lot of compassion for them in the sense that it's very depressing to live a life disconnected from your spirit. It's very bleak. I can't even fully understand that, because I'll be honest, there's never been a point in my life where I never had a felt sense of the spiritual. Even when my cognitive beliefs were shifting and changing, I was always acutely aware of this higher aspect of myself, of this super conscious aspect of myself, of this higher spiritual energy that exists all around us, within us. And so I can't imagine how depressing it is to live without that knowing, to live without that felt knowing. And it's not like you can transmit your experience to another person. This is something that every person has to experience for themselves. So this is often something that comes up for me, actually, when I end up in these debates with people, is they'll say, well, how do you know that your experience isn't just subjective? This is all, made up psychic phenomena. And I can't really refute that, because unless this person has experienced this for themselves, they're not going to fully understand what it is I am speaking on. There's a certain level of initiation one must have to go through themselves in order to sort of speak the same language when it comes to these topics. And so I just try to remain in this compassionate space of really empathizing with how difficult it is to live like that, and understand that it's not my job to try to force a change, because force never creates change. The greatest source of alchemy comes when someone comes to these truths themselves, when they blossom into these truths themselves. You can plant little seeds here and there, you can be a spark in their life, but ultimately they have to be the ones to light that flame within themselves, because that is going to lead them to their own remembrance, that is going to lead them into their own cosmic pathway, and that's going to be the most powerful, most beautiful journey for them. So I think we also have to have compassion for ourselves, because ultimately we really just want people to feel the same thing that we're feeling. When you feel these beautiful states within your body, and I'm not talking about these like transcendental, where you're like, more Luciferic in the anthroposophical sense states. I'm talking about these really rooted, grounded experiences of that spiritual warmth. Of course, you're going to want other people in your life to feel that to the same extent that you do. It's only natural to want to spread that love, to spread that joy, to spread that peace. But we can't force that. Every person has to come to that on their own. And we have to learn to accept being seen as ridiculous, as foolish, as non-scientific. And, that's always been so interesting to me, because even when you do present something that fits within a scientific paradigm, many of these people will find any way possible to refute it. It's like they are absolutely intent on not seeing the spiritual. They are coming into the conversation without even having an open mind. They're coming in almost already triggered. And think of what has to happen in a person's life for them to reach that point of rejecting spirituality to such a strong degree. There are a couple things that can happen. Number one, that person can grow up in a dogmatic religion, and this fundamentally distorts their perspective of spirituality, and they become very resentful. And so they are really acting out of this wounded inner self. Something else that can happen is someone can have a bad experience with spirituality. They can enter into a lot of these communities which are lacking structure, they're lacking coherence, there's not a lot of agreement, like the New Age, for example, and it can be so chaotic and there can be so much going on that it's easy for them to just dismiss the entire thing altogether, or they can have an experience with a dark entity and it's easier for them to just suppress that and say that it doesn't exist at all out of fear. And it can also come from having these experiences where they use spirituality as a tool, so they think it's a method of getting what they want. And this is coming from this more immature mindset, but this actually is something that someone I was discussing this with had experienced, where they were saying, well, God can't exist because I was praying for this specific thing when I was maybe like 10 or 11 and God never gave it to me. So if God exists, then he sucks, basically. And I thought that was just such a a sad reason to really reject spirituality as a whole, that you're coming at it from this selfish perspective of what can this give me? And if it's not giving me what I want, it's not real. I'm going to reject it altogether, and I'm going to focus on materialism. So all we can really do is send these people our love and thank them for the opportunity to stand rooted and grounded in our spiritual beliefs, to prove we are who we say we are, and transmit as much of that feeling of spiritual warmth as possible, and really try to maintain our authenticity. Because if we start to come from this condescending place or this place of fear or coercion, then we are only going to be pushing people farther away from an authentic spiritual path, from finding this within themselves. And so let yourself, your own embodiment, be the ultimate message of what this is all about, right? Instead of trying to convince someone through your words. And yeah.